We have Natasha and Chelsea and Kendra helping me out with the chat pods and the actual programming on Adobe Connect. So today, resumes. Which one is best for me? We're going to have some questions and answers with some very wonderful human resources professionals who have volunteered their time for us today. First of all, we have Leanne Hoagland-Smith. She is a CRO and jurist, and I actually had to look up what jurist means. This will give you a chance to check dictionary.com if you don't already know. So I'd like to welcome Leanne and thank her for joining us this morning. Hello, Leanne.
Good morning, Dee.
Do you want to give everybody just a hint about what a jurist might be?
Well, I think everyone on this call, in a way, is a jurist as well. They are looking to discover and guide their careers.
Very good. Very good. Next up, we have Christy Seawall. She is with Career Catalyst, and I heard Christy speak at a presentation one time, and I thought she had some great input as an interview coach and a resume writer. So we'd like to welcome Christy to our call this morning. Thank you, Christy, for joining us.
Thank you, Dee. Good morning, everyone. I'm glad to be here.
Next up on our panel of presenters is Craig Frank of Frank's Employment. They are a full-service staffing company outside of Chicago in the Collier County of Kane. And Craig is a wonderful person who has been involved in the community for a very long time, and I want to thank Craig for joining us this morning.
Good morning. I hope we can be of help to you today.
Great. And I'm Dee Reinhardt. I am with Time to Market. I am a social media strategist, and I am working on these series of webinars with Illinois WorkNet and hope that you are learning many things during this process. So without further ado, we are going to dive into our panel discussion on resumes. Our first question up this morning is, why do we need resumes? Are they even still a viable way to represent yourself to a potential employer? Let's start with Christy on this one.
So I absolutely think resumes are still needed in today's job market. It is the most conventional, traditional way to present your skills and experience and help set yourself apart from other people. It is the tool. There are others that you can supplement it with and should, but you need a solid, strong resume that markets you for the position you're interested in.
That's good. That's good. Leanne, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, you already have something posted on the screen that even in today's marketplace, there is documentation required, and a resume is still a necessity for much of those compliance documentation requirements. And I think the only change now is the resume, if it can tell your story, because it truly is your marketing message to that potential employer.
And marketing is the big thing. Craig, what do you think about all of this?
Well, it's amazing how many people we have walk in the door that say, I'm looking for work, or are you hiring, or do you have any jobs? And we ask, do you have a resume? And they say, oh, no, I don't. Or worse yet, they say, well, yes, I have one, but I didn't bring one with me. And it seems like to employers, you don't really exist if you don't have something formal on paper to give to them.
That's very true. And even creative people that might have a portfolio still need to have a paper resume, right?
Correct. Yes. You have to give them something.
Yes. All right. I'm going to ask my speakers to please make sure that you're speaking as loudly as you can, because some people are on speakers that can't hear very well. So when you're answering the questions, please make sure that you're speaking directly into your headpiece. Our next question is, how does a resume differ for somebody who is like me, old as dirt, or somebody who's just graduating from college or high school and just starting out into the workplace? Leanne, you want to take this one first?
I think it's pretty simplistic. The difference is going to be your experience, your skill sets. It's pretty, I think, simple there. And the other thing is going to be how you promote yourself. A person starting out in the workplace, if they understand marketing, they may actually have a resume that's not as deep, but that is emotionally more engaging than a more mature worker who is very stuck in the traditional resume structure. And you have some people, experts here on the call, that really can, I think, talk to that better than I can.
I want somebody wrote the point about sharing their story. How can you share your story, that last bullet point, better if you're just using bullet points with experience? Who wants to address that one?
This is Christy. I can take a shot at it. I mean, I
Okay.
talk with my candidates a lot about, sharing their accomplishment stories, I call them. And the initial way we try to uncover what some of those stories might be is through a STAR story. Many people might have heard of that acronym, or I think I may have even seen it in here, a PAR story. Some people refer to it that way. And that stands for, the acronym STAR stands for the situation or the task that you were involved in, the actions you took, and the results that you achieved. The PAR stands for the problem or project that you were involved in, the actions and the results. Typically, we start with that. You get much more detail than you can put on a resume, but you're able to look at that and really boil it down, usually by only sharing the action, which kind of gets to that transferable skill, that action verb, and then the results on your resume. But by fully developing the story up front, it can serve you well as you have to speak to that in interviews. So that's how I try to help my candidates uncover their stories.
Great.
And visually, it just makes it easier to read than when you have a large block, a large paragraph of text. The reader's eyes sometimes get lazy and they don't read it all. When you have bullet points that aren't necessarily even complete sentences, but just have the few key words in there that you want to get across to somebody, that jumps out at the reader much more easily.
Good.
Absolutely.
Now, go ahead.
Well, what I was going to say is most recruiters and hiring managers don't, they don't read resumes, so the paragraph format is very difficult to grab their attention. They scan resumes, and they're looking for those keywords and things that jump out at them. And things that jump out are not only, the keywords, but also metrics, numbers. They draw, if you look at a resume with numbers on the page, you're drawn to it. So whenever you can be quantifiable, that helps tell your story.
Very true.
Exactly, and we have some good examples of that coming up, and you'll be able to see how that's so much easier to read and how the numbers really do jump off the page for the reader.
Good. Now, what if one of your best jobs was 20 years ago, but you want to keep it on your resume?
This is Craig. My advice for that is that you would list the first 10 years, 10, 12, maybe 15 years of your experience, starting with the most recent. But if you have something that's 20 years ago, you can put a section after your chronological listing that says additional experience includes, and then you could list the highlights of that particular work experience without necessarily having to say when it was.
That's a good idea. Thanks for that, Craig. We're going to move on to the next slide now. What are the key elements of any resume? And is a summary or personal mission statement still important? Does it matter what order things are in on a resume? And what shouldn't you include? I know that's a lot of questions for that one question, but Craig, you want to jump in on this one first?
Well, yes. The reason it's important to have things in a particular order is that the reader, the hiring manager, people who look at lots of resumes get to expect certain things to be in certain places. And the one mistake that people make quite often is they start listing in a chronological format. They start listing the the oldest job they had, their very first job out of school, they list that first, and then they work their way down to the most recent one, and that's backwards orders. Backwards order. So because when I look at the first one, I assume that's their most recent or the job they're doing now, and when it's something that they did 20 years ago, then I'm already misinformed and I'm not following right. So unfortunately, we're creatures of habit, and you need to put it in the format that we're used to seeing.
So the way that they're on the screen, Christy or Craig or Leanne, are those the kind of thing, is that the order that it should be in, or should it be in a different order?
Well, this is
Professional
Leanne. I kind of agree with the order only because I also believe there should be alignment between your resume and your LinkedIn profile. And this is basically how your LinkedIn profile looks too. So that's from my perspective, because LinkedIn, from my understanding and talking to a couple of recruiters who are clients, it is the most highly used website. And they find having that professional summary first helps them get an idea. Do they want to continue scanning the resume?
Good. All right.
This is Christy, and I agree with that. The only thing I would say, really, in my opinion, the objective would come first, and typically that's not on a LinkedIn profile. And that's only in the case when you need to put what the objective is and you can't really integrate it into the summary of qualifications or the professional summary. So I kind of view professional summary or summary of qualifications as the same thing. And then the experience education. And then I would add that after that, with education, you might put any certifications or licenses or, things that you have in addition to that there.
Good point. Now, one thing that is on a LinkedIn profile that's, I don't know whether or not it should be included on a resume, is your hobbies, your likes. What about those sorts of things on a resume?
It's true LinkedIn is changing kind of the way we're thinking about resumes, but in my mind it hasn't changed them yet, because something that's on a LinkedIn profile that's not on a resume typically is a picture. And, that has kind of challenged that thinking, but I still think that things like pictures, date of birth, nationality, hobbies, interests, really shouldn't be on a resume. The only thing I would say is, like, for a new college grad, if the interests support their job objective, and in some way is linked to it, so, that they, could include more interest because, they have less to put out there, and that kind of speaks to who they are and what they bring to the table.
Sure.
I agree with that. Your hobbies and interests should have a tie to the type of work you're trying to do, or else leave them off. I remember when I just graduated from college and was looking for a job, I gave my resume to a hiring manager, and I had a bunch of interests listed and hobbies, because that's what I thought you were supposed to do. And the guy looked at me and said, "Wow, with all those hobbies, when do you find time to work?"
We have a question from the audience that says there's a lot of conflicting information out there regarding summaries and objectives, and many advise against both now. So is an objective really necessary any longer?
I believe it is, and with one of the samples coming up, I'll show you how we'll show you how an objective should be written. But personally, I like an objective, but only if you can say exactly what you want. Too many people never really say what they want, and they just ramble on about how nice they are and what a good work ethic they have and all of that. But personally, I do not like a summary, because a resume itself is a summary of your work history and abilities. So to put a summary on a summary, to me, is redundant and a waste of time. I don't read them.
Okay. All right.
This
Let's
is
move on.
Christy. Or that's okay, if you're ready.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead.
So for the objective, generally, I feel they should not be included if you're looking to continue in the same line of work. It's not necessary, but I would include it in the professional summaries, like a seasoned HR professional, so that you're, kind of stating what you are right there. But for someone that's making a career transition, you need to put the objective to make sure it's clear to the person getting your resume what you're going for. And then on the summary of qualifications, I understand the resume is a summary, but the resume is a summary of sometimes a 20-year work history. And what we try to do with our summaries is really help people align what their experience brings to that particular employer. So I don't like the summaries that are fluff, which is maybe what you're talking about, Craig, and kind of those fluffy characteristics and things. I like them to be, really related to what the employer is looking for. So, and you'll see some examples in the resumes that I provided.
Well, I agree with that. If you say you're keeping the summary specific enough, and in this case, I could use it as an in place of an objective, then I'm okay with you on that. But yes, no fluff, please.
Right.
Okay. Next thing is, what are the biggest mistakes that people make? And Christy, I'd like you to address how you have people approach it. And then, Craig, I'd like you to tell us one or two reasons of things that you've actually seen. And Leanne, if you want to pop in here at all, please do that. So,
Okay.
Christy, let's start with you.
Sure. One of the biggest mistakes that I see people when they bring their resumes to me and they're asking for help a lot of times is that, they're really thinking of it as a historical document, and that makes sense because you're presenting your past experience to employers. But we have to take the view of it being a forward-looking document, and it's helping you to create your future. So I try to help people, first of all, start by really analyzing what the employer is looking for in the job, and then thinking back through their experience and coming up with examples that help them to showcase they have the skills and abilities and experience to do what the employer is looking for. It's still a representation of your past, but it helps the employer see what you can do for them in the future. So I think that is a shift for people because so that's one of the things. The second thing is that a lot of resumes that I look like read very much like a job description. And, a job description, if you have, 4 business analysts working at one company, they're going to be the same. But what they did, they contributed, the results they had, the impact they made to the company will be different. And that's what we try to focus on, the difference they made for the company in their job. So those are two of the big mistakes that I see people making, and how I try to help them, address those and make their resume really stand out from the crowd.
Craig?
Well, and another thing, and if you're able to advance to the next slide, you'll see a really bad example, or I should say it's a really good example of what was a really bad attempt at a resume. I left the person's name was on the top, but and I'm not sure if I'm seeing the slides in real time or not, so I don't know if you're on that one or not. But
I just clicked it.
Clearly, it says it's all about that person. It's written in a cryptic fashion. There's typos, but the first thing he says is how much pay he wants. Next thing he talks about is how far he's willing to drive. We all have standards when it comes to pay and distance, but to an employer, you have to act like that's secondary. And what this shows is this is all about what he wants, and employers don't care about that. Not for the most part. They care about what you can provide to them. What can you bring to the table? How can you help their company? So this is a really good example of everything that's wrong in what you put on paper.
And one other thing I think I'll add, we're presuming most of these resumes are being delivered electronically anymore. They're attached to an online application. If you are successful for that call-in, I would encourage people to bring in a professionally Word document on good linen paper, because that also will stand you make you stand out away from everybody else. And just have it on you.
Personally, I agree with that. I like putting a resume on nicer paper, linen or bond, but I do see a lot of the experts saying no, that's not expected anymore because people are, have quick printers at home and
nice paper.
yes.
I don't think the employer would hold it against you if you went the extra step and had a printed copy on nice paper at the interview in case you needed it.
True. Let's move on to the next slide. How do we avoid making mistakes on our resumes? And I know Christy mentioned earlier about the STAR system. Within LinkedIn, I know that you need to make sure that your LinkedIn profile is reflective of your resume and vice versa, that you're not leaving out major components. What else can people do to avoid making mistakes?
This is Leanne. I'll pop in real quick. And it's really about, I think, one of the biggest mistakes in my practice and coaching career transition is people fail to consistently update and review their resumes. I mean, I was just coaching a client last night, and she was telling me what was going on, and I said, have you put that on your resume? And she smiled at me sheepishly and said, no. I said, why not? These should be living, breathing documents of your contributions. You can always shorten them if you're sending something to someone, but at least have an ongoing journal of your accomplishments.
That's one of the best things about LinkedIn is if you can get in there and update it regularly, you can keep that very current. Christy, do you want to add anything?
Well, proofread, have someone else proofread. You want your resume to be perfect. You don't want any mistakes on there. So, I mean, that's, I think, the best way to avoid mistakes, in addition to the things we've already talked about.
Craig, Craig, how do you feel about people? I remember when I first came out of college, you printed 100 copies of one set resume, and that's what you mailed out in mass to all the employers in the area. What's going on now that people can make changes and avoid those mistakes, and if they spot one, what do they do with it?
Well, obviously, the main difference nowadays is that resumes are more often than not submitted electronically. So we don't print out 100 copies. If we're putting together a resume for somebody, we may give them one or a couple of copies, but we give them the electronic copy. We'll either put it on a flash drive or we'll just email it to them. But what I feel is that if somebody sits down and writes one resume one time, they don't have a good one. I tell people to sit down and at their computer and type in everything they can think of their background and what they've done and how well they've done it, and then use that as your master document to pull smaller pieces of information from that relate to the particular job you're applying to. And if you've been job hunting for a few months, you've got dozens of different resumes that you've put together that are tailored to each of those dozens of jobs that you've applied to.
Mm-hmm.
So it's an evolving document.
Very good.
I definitely agree with that.
Absolutely.
I know people hate to hear they have to customize their resume, but that is what will help you stand apart and get called in for an interview. So if you're sending out lots of resumes and not getting called in and you haven't been customizing, that's something you definitely need to try.
We have a question. We have a couple questions.
She just said something that I wanted to key in on real quick about getting the interview. Keep in mind that the resume, the purpose of it is not to get you the job. It's to get you the interview. So don't try to put too much in there.
Mhm.
True. We've got a couple of questions from the audience about addressing gaps in employment. Maybe it's they've been home caring for a family member, or maybe they have some sort of other something that came up that they just weren't in the workforce for a period of time. How do you address it on a writer's perspective, and then how do you look at it from an employer's perspective? Christy, let's start with you.
So there are different ways that you can address that. If there's any other things that you've been doing during that time period that are related, if you've, while you were caring for a sick family member, which I know is all time consuming and probably very difficult to do. If you've done any, professional development or any volunteer work, you can use that to fill in the gaps. Try to make it work related. But, if not, sometimes we just put it on the resume, family caregiver and the dates, without a lot of detail. That is one thing we've done. You can use the functional resume, which I think we're going to talk about, to kind of mask that a little bit. But, really, when you're trying to get back into the workforce after things like this, the thing that is going to serve you better than applying online is really getting out and talking to people that are in your network, because, that way you can talk about it and get past it rather than trying, it's difficult to get past the computer screen sometimes when you've had that gap.
True. Craig?
Yes. When it comes to being a family caregiver or even being a mom, staying at home raising kids, when I look at that, I say, all right, if you've been at home raising children, responsible for a family, I believe that's a good skill in other words, I believe that you can be a responsible person and handle responsibility in my business or somebody else's just because you've proven it by raising a family.
Correct. Correct.
So don't try to hide it.
One last question here from the audience that I want to address before we move on is that someone had JobBox write their resume, and they've got a summary that's 6 lines long, then their professional skills, and then experience. So is the 6-line summary too much?
I think it depends on what it says and how it relates to what they're trying to accomplish. So I'd need to see it in relation to the rest of the resume, because, you don't want, as I think Craig was referring to, you don't want it to be repetitive of the things below it. You want it to be complementary or, kind of adding additional value or, I don't know. So I don't necessarily think 6 lines is too long, but if it's in a paragraph format, look at it, see if you can break it down into bullet points.
I tend to be a little more hardcore on that because I guess I see so many summaries that are just repetitive fluff that I tend to not read them at all. My eyes jump right past that and go to work history and skill summaries and things like that.
And so here's where it's tricky. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So it's better to keep them short, in other words.
Right.
I need to move us on because we want to have plenty of time to talk about the actual examples that we have. So what are some alternatives to a traditional resume? We've got a couple of things on here. LinkedIn is actually one of them. But then what are some other options that people can use?
Personally, one option I like is what I'd call a marketing letter, because you're not always, at least if you're an aggressive job hunter, you're not always applying for stated position openings. This one particular job that you saw advertised, you might be going to a company that you've heard about and researched that you think would be a great place to work. And you're interested in something that you could do at that company. So you might send them just a brief letter, a couple of paragraphs that key in on a couple of your strengths and just send that to them without having to send a full resume. So I call that a marketing letter. It's sort of like a cover letter, but a standalone.
And this is Leanne jumping back into a past slide talking about research. And this goes with what Craig just talked about, is if you've noticed something going on with a company, you can take that letter as a marketing message and say something very pertinent about your skill sets. And if you are expanding in the future, based upon, what I read in the paper, whatever, that may be the way to open up the door.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah.
I agree with
Yeah.
both of those. One thing on LinkedIn, because it is such an important marketing space right now, and recruiters definitely are using it. And I agree with what's on here to personalize your URL so that you can include it on your resume. But if you're including it on your resume as a place for them to go to for additional information, make sure there's additional information out there for them, and it's not just a repeat of your resume, because that's wasting their time. You want to make sure that you're getting some good, solid recommendations out there, because now they can go out there and they're seeing a third-party account of what it's like to work with you. What discussions are you involved in? Is there any, are there any, PowerPoints or anything that speak to your expertise that you can post? You want that to be in addition to your resume, not just a repeat of your resume.
Sure. Some other things that I've seen online are infographics and YouTube videos, and just some different things that the creative personality would be able to make use of, maybe more so than an accountant or an attorney might be able to use. Those are just some other suggestions that I've seen along the way.
I was just going to pop in real quick. When you're talking about that, it made me think of some other marketing ideas. If you're going to be using that letter, why not create a DVD with a YouTube video, some articles that you've written, if you've done anything like that, where it's really engaging, and again, it makes you stand out.
Very true. Our last slide before we start into our examples is what are some of the best online options for job seekers? And we've got obviously the LinkedIn profile, embedding your resume in there. And we mentioned YouTube just a moment ago. Can you think of anything else that we might be able to suggest for our job seekers on the call today?
As far as sites, like Google Plus is getting some traction, and some people are looking there. I know Elise in our office maintains a good presence on Google Plus, just because you never know what might be there that isn't in LinkedIn or Facebook. I
like the comment on here, the post to industry-specific niche jobs. Those are something that you'd have to look for. Where might somebody find some of those options?
So this is Christy. I mean, I would look at, are there any professional associations related to, the field that you're in, any industry associations? Go there first. Most of them do have, job posting as an aspect of their websites. And I would just Google it, marketing professional associations, because there's usually more than one. There might be the American Marketing Association, and there might be the and I'm making this up, Chicagoland Marketing Professionals or something. Also look for like the any alumni. That's a little different, but alumni websites. And anytime, and you can do that on LinkedIn too by joining those groups. Anytime you can kind of make a connection with people, through those types of things, that's going to be better than going to the large web job, boards and